This story isn't just about a celebrity disagreement. It's about how public narratives form, who controls them, and what happens when private family tension unfolds in front of millions. At the center is Brooklyn Peltz Beckham, his wife Nicola Peltz Beckham, and now an unexpected voice entering the conversation, Alana Hadid. But here's the part people didn't see coming. The connection between these families didn't start with the marriage. It goes back years through past relationships, overlapping social circles, and long-standing public attention. And once you understand that timeline, the reactions happening now start to look very different. Because this isn't only about what was said, it's about why it's being said now, and who benefits when personal matters become public narratives. Main body. The strongest moment in this entire situation didn't come from headlines. It came from Brooklyn himself when he publicly shared that he doesn't want reconciliation with his parents at this time, describing what he sees as a long-standing strain. His words, presented through social media, framed the situation as someone setting boundaries and speaking from personal experience. That alone shifted the tone of the conversation from rumor to first-hand perspective, at least from one side. But public stories rarely stay one-sided for long. Soon after, online discussion expanded beyond the Beckham household. Commentary pages, fan accounts, and pop culture communities began drawing comparisons to other high-profile family tensions. Not as accusations, but as patterns people think they recognize when fame, marriage, and family expectations intersect. Then Alana Hadid entered the discussion, not through an interview, not through a statement, but through a comment on social media. And that's important. This wasn't a formal position. It was a casual online reaction, the kind that spreads quickly because it feels unfiltered. Alana, known publicly as the half-sister of Gigi and Bella Hadid, also shares a past link here through her brother Anwar, who reportedly dated Nicola years before Brooklyn and Nicola's relationship began. That historical overlap instantly made her words more noticeable, not because she's directly involved, but because she represents a bridge between timelines. So what did her comment really do? It didn't introduce new claims. It didn't reveal private information. Instead, it added a tone, a skeptical one, about how public visibility and privacy are discussed by celebrities. And that tone matters because online audiences often respond more strongly to attitude than to facts. Now here's where things get layered. On one side, Brooklyn's post described feeling unheard and wanting space. On another side, sources close to different perspectives have said attempts at communication have been made behind the scenes. These kinds of differences aren't unusual in family disagreements, especially when those families live under constant media focus. According to publicly available reporting, both reconciliation efforts and continued distance have been described by different insiders. That contrast creates a situation where the public is watching a story unfold without full context. And when context is missing, people tend to fill the gaps themselves. But the timing is what raises eyebrows. Why is this resurfacing now, years after the wedding? Why do older moments suddenly feel relevant again? And why do outside voices like Alana's resonate so strongly even though they aren't central players? Because public memory online is short, but digital records are permanent. When someone revisits the past, even casually, it can make an older chapter feel current again, and that's where emotional interpretation takes over. Some viewers see someone defending a partner. Others see family loyalty being challenged. Others still see a broader conversation about how celebrity families handle boundaries, identity, and independence when marriage creates new dynamics. None of those interpretations require extreme conclusions. They reflect how audiences connect personal experiences to public figures, often projecting their own family dynamics onto what they're watching. But here's the question that quietly shapes everything. Is this a family conflict playing out publicly, or a public narrative that's now influencing a family conflict? Because once millions of people form opinions, the pressure changes how everyone involved communicates, or chooses not to. And Alana's comment, brief as it was, became part of that pressure cycle, not because it was detailed, but because it reinforced a viewpoint that already existed among certain observers. That's how online discourse works. Repetition builds perceived certainty, even when the situation itself is still evolving. And it leaves us at an interesting crossroads. If privacy is the goal, public responses can complicate it. But if silence allows speculation to grow, speaking up can feel necessary. That balance is one many public figures navigate constantly, and it rarely has a clean solution. So what happens next depends less on social media and more on whether private conversations ever replace public statements. But before we get there, there's another layer people overlook: how weddings, milestones, and symbolic moments often become emotional flashpoints in family systems, especially under media scrutiny. And that brings us to the part of the story that shaped much of today's interpretation. Weddings are rarely just events. They're symbols of independence, partnership, transition, and sometimes shifting family roles. When everything goes smoothly, those symbols unite people. When expectations differ, even small misunderstandings can take on outsized emotional meaning. According to public accounts shared over time, Brooklyn and Nicola's wedding has often been referenced as a turning point in how observers interpret the current distance. Not because ceremonies themselves cause conflict, but because major life transitions can highlight differences in communication styles, boundaries, and expectations between generations. And when those moments unfold in a high-profile setting, interpretation multiplies. Here's something important. When someone describes a personal experience tied to a milestone event, it reflects their emotional reality. At the same time, other people involved may remember the same moment differently. That doesn't automatically mean anyone is being dishonest. Memory and meaning are deeply personal, especially when emotions run high. So when older wedding moments re-enter discussion now, they act less like new information and more like emotional context for how people understand today's distance. But why does the public stay so engaged? Because this situation combines three things audiences tend to follow closely. The Beckham name carries decades of public familiarity. People feel like they've watched this family grow, which creates a sense of emotional investment, even though the real relationships remain private. When someone marries, the story often shifts from child of to partner in. That transition can change public expectations, media framing, and personal boundaries all at once. When someone like Alana Hadid comments, someone adjacent but not central, it signals that social circles overlap. That widens the story's perceived scope without actually adding confirmed details. And here's the subtle shift happening beneath the surface. Early discussion focused on what happened. Now the focus is on who is believed. That's a different kind of narrative. It turns a situation from event-based to perspective-based. And perspective stories don't resolve through facts alone. They shift when communication changes. Another element often overlooked is generational difference in handling public life. Older generations of public figures often maintained carefully controlled media interactions. Younger public figures grew up with direct-to-audience communication through social platforms. That difference can make approaches to privacy, storytelling, and boundaries look very different, even when the goal, protecting relationships, might be similar. So what looks like contradiction from the outside might in some cases be contrasting communication styles shaped by different eras of fame. That doesn't remove emotional impact, but it reframes intent. And then there's the role of audience amplification. When a story trends, algorithms reward engagement. That can unintentionally lock people into defending their positions more firmly, because every response becomes part of a larger public conversation. Silence can be interpreted. Speech can be analyzed. Either choice carries weight. This creates what media analysts sometimes call a feedback loop, where public reaction influences how stories continue to develop. In that kind of environment, even a short comment like Alana's becomes symbolic. It isn't just one person's reaction. It represents how extended networks observe situations, how social media blurs lines between private thought and public stance, and how quickly tone can shape perception. But here's the part people rarely pause to consider. Most family relationships are more complex than the snapshots we see. Disagreements, distance, reconnection, and change can all exist at different times. Public narratives tend to freeze people in one moment, even though real relationships evolve. So while headlines focus on division, the long-term story may still be unwritten. And that's where the conversation moves from speculation to reflection. What can viewers actually take from this? Not conclusions about who's right, but insight into how public life magnifies ordinary human challenges. Boundaries communication, independence, loyalty, and identity shifts after marriage. These themes resonate because they're universal, even if the setting is extraordinary, which leads to the bigger perspective. Zooming out, this situation highlights something bigger than any one family. When personal relationships intersect with public visibility, every action carries layered meaning. Silence speaks, words echo, and outside commentary, even brief, can ripple further than intended. Understanding that dynamic helps us watch stories like this with more context and less assumption. Because what unfolds publicly is often only a fraction of the full picture. And the next chapter isn't about past moments. It's about whether communication styles, expectations, and boundaries can evolve over time when the spotlight never really turns off. If you're interested in the bigger patterns behind stories like this, that's where the conversation continues.